Lesson 1. Introduction to the Skeletal System. Welcome back to our shared space of quiet inquiry. Before we begin, I invite you to make yourself fully comfortable. Shift your shoulders, perhaps unclench your jaw, and let the heavy weight of the day slide off you, like a coat you no longer need to wear. You are safe here, and there is absolutely nowhere else you need to be. Tonight, we embark on a new journey together. We are going to turn our gaze inward, past the skin, past the muscle, to the very deepest part of your physical architecture. We are beginning our study of the skeletal system. Now, when we think of a skeleton, our minds often drift to the images we see in museums. Dry, white, brittle structures standing in glass cases. They seem static, they seem finished. But I want you to set that image aside. The system we are about to explore within you is not dry rock. It is alive. It is a dynamic, shifting, and vibrant landscape that changes with every step you take and every meal you eat. It is the silent guardian that has held you upright from the moment you took your first step. In this first lesson, we are not going to worry about memorizing the names of all 206 bones. That will come in time. Tonight, our goal is simply to understand the purpose. We want to understand the why. Why do you have this internal framework? What is it doing for you, right now, as you lie there drifting towards sleep? Let us settle in and uncover the grand design of the human frame. To understand the skeletal system, we must view it as a multitasking marvel. It is not merely a coat rack for your body. It is an active participant in your physiology. As we unravel its mysteries, we find that the skeleton performs 5 fundamental functions. I want to walk through them with you, one by one, letting each concept flow into the next like a gentle stream. Let us begin with the most intuitive function, support. Imagine for a moment a building without steel beams or a tent without poles. It would collapse into a shapeless heap of canvas. Your body is much the same. Without the rigid framework of your bones, the softer tissues, your muscles, your skin, your intricate organs would simply succumb to gravity. The skeleton provides the internal scaffolding that gives you your human shape. It allows you to sit upright in a chair, to stand tall against the pull of the earth, and to maintain the integrity of your form. The legs act as massive pillars, capable of bearing incredible weight, while the rib cage acts as a wall, supporting the thoracic cavity. It is the silent strength that allows you to exist in 3-dimensional space. From this idea of support, we naturally flow into the second function, protection. While the skeleton holds you up, it also acts as a fortress for your most delicate and vital treasures. Nature is wise, and it has encased your most critical organs in hard bone. Consider the skull. It is a fused helmet of immense strength, wrapping completely around the soft, gelatinous complexity of the brain. Without this hard casing, the slightest impact could be catastrophic. Move your attention down to your chest. Here, the ribs curve around to form a flexible cage. Inside this cage, the heart beats and the lungs expand. These organs are the engines of your life, yet they are physically fragile. The ribs act as the bars of a cell, protecting them from the bumps and bruises of the outside world. Even your pelvis, that wide basin at your hips, serves as a shield for your reproductive and digestive organs. You might picture the skeleton as a personal suit of armor that you never take off, worn beneath the skin to guard the sanctuary of your internal life. The third function brings this armor to life: movement. A suit of armor is useless if it is frozen in place. The skeleton is designed to be mobile. This occurs because your bones act as levers. In physics, a lever is a rigid rod that moves around a fixed point, which we call a fulcrum. In your body, the bones are the rods, and the joints are the fulcrums. It is important to remember that bones, by themselves, cannot move. They are passive. They need an engine. That engine is your muscular system. Your muscles are attached to your bones by strong cables called tendons. When a muscle contracts, it pulls on the bone, and the bone pivots at the joint. This simple mechanical action is what allows you to walk, to wave your hand, to breathe, and to turn the pages of a book. The skeleton provides the machinery of motion, the muscles provide the power. Together, they grant you the freedom to navigate the world. Now, let us move to a function that is often overlooked, a function that happens silently, deep within the microscopic world of the bone matrix. This is storage. I want you to change your visualization. Stop thinking of bone as stone and start thinking of it as a bank vault. This vault does not store gold or diamonds, but something far more valuable to your biology: minerals. The most important of these are calcium and phosphorus. Calcium is essential for life. It is not just for strong teeth. Your heart needs calcium to beat, your nerves need it to fire signals, and your muscles need it to contract. The level of calcium in your blood must remain perfectly steady. When you eat calcium-rich foods, your body deposits the excess into your bones for safekeeping a deposit into the bank. Conversely, if your diet is low in calcium, your body withdraws it from the bones to keep the heart and nerves functioning. This trade-off happens every hour of every day. Your skeleton is the reservoir that ensures your body's chemical economy never goes bankrupt. Finally, we arrive at perhaps the most miraculous function of all: hematopoiesis. This is a beautiful, complex word derived from Greek, meaning blood-making. It is easy to think of bones as dry and lifeless, but deep inside the hollow centers of your bones, specifically the flat bones like the skull, pelvis, ribs, and the ends of the long arm and leg bones, there lies a substance called red marrow. This red marrow is a bustling factory. It is here, protected by the hard outer shell of the bone, that your blood is born. Red blood cells, which carry oxygen to every corner of your mind and body, are created here. White blood cells, the soldiers of your immune system that fight off infection, are forged here. Platelets, which clot your blood to stop bleeding, are manufactured here. It is a poetic truth of our anatomy. The hardest, most rigid part of the human body is responsible for creating the most fluid, vital, and life-giving substance we possess. Take a moment to let those ideas find their place in your mind. Support, protection, movement, storage, blood cell formation. If your mind is still following along, let us go a little deeper. Let us add some color to this picture. I mentioned earlier that we should not view the skeleton as dry rock. Let's explore why. If you were to look at a living bone during a surgery or through advanced imaging, you would see that it is pinkish, not white. It is covered in a membrane called the periosteum, which is rich with nerve endings and blood vessels. This is why a broken bone hurts so intensely. The skeleton is fully wired into your nervous system. It feels. It also bleeds. There are tiny canals running through the hard matrix of your bones, like tunnels in a mountain, carrying nutrients to the living cells buried deep inside the mineral walls. These cells are alive, sitting in their microscopic caverns, communicating with one another. We should also distinguish between the two types of marrow to add another layer of understanding. We spoke of the red marrow, the blood factory, but as we age, much of that red marrow in our long bones is replaced by yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is essentially stored energy. It is adipose tissue or fat. Think of this as a strategic reserve. In times of extreme starvation or survival, the body can convert this yellow marrow back into chemical energy to keep you alive. So, your skeleton is not just a structural frame and a mineral bank. it is also an emergency energy pantry. Furthermore, modern science has begun to discover that the skeleton acts as an endocrine organ. This means it secretes hormones. The bones produce a hormone called osteocalcin, which helps regulate your blood sugar and fat deposition. It even influences your brain function. This connects your skeleton to your metabolism and your mood in ways we are only just beginning to understand. It is not a silent, isolated structure. It is in constant conversation with your pancreas, your fat cells, and your brain. So, why does this matter to you? How does this knowledge anchor itself in your daily reality? Understanding the skeletal system changes how we treat our bodies. When you go for a walk or lift a heavy object, you are not just burning calories, you are sending a signal to your skeleton. You are telling it, I need you to be strong. There is a principle in physiology known as Wolff's Law. It states that bone grows and remodels in response to the forces that are placed upon it. If you are active, if you carry weight, your bones respond by depositing more minerals, becoming denser and stronger. They reinforce themselves, just as a callus forms on a worker's hand. Conversely, if we are sedentary, or if we spend time in the weightlessness of space like an astronaut, the bones sense the lack of demand. The bank begins to close down branches. The body dissolves the bone matrix because it deems it unnecessary, expensive tissue to maintain. This leads to fragility. So you see, this isn't just theory in a book. It explains why movement is medicine. Every time you stand up, you are literally sculpting your own internal fortress. You are the architect of your own skeleton. Furthermore, understanding the storage function helps us appreciate our nutrition. When we drink a glass of milk, or eat leafy greens, or stand in the sunlight to generate vitamin D, we are essentially sending a delivery truck to the construction site. We are giving the osteocytes, the bone cells, the bricks and mortar they need to repair the micro cracks that occur simply from living. We have covered a great deal of ground tonight. We have defined the skeleton not as a spooky symbol of death, but as the very foundation of life. We have seen how it supports our weight, shields our hearts, allows us to dance, manages our mineral economy, and births our blood. We have acknowledged that it is living, feeling tissue, capable of listening to our movements and responding by growing stronger. This is a good place to rest your thoughts. You now hold the big picture in your mind. You understand the mission of the skeletal system. But a question remains. What is this material actually made of? We know it stores calcium, but how is it arranged? How can something be so light that we can jump, yet so strong that it lasts for centuries after we are gone? To answer that, we must zoom in. We need to go from the macroscopic view of the whole body to the microscopic view of the tissue. So, let's hold that thought here, a complete piece of the puzzle. Our next lesson will hand us the adjacent piece, where we will slide a sample under the microscope and explore the fascinating world of bone histology. For now, let the logic of the body wash over you. You are supported. You are protected. Lesson 2. Bone Histology. Welcome back. Take a slow, deep breath and let yourself sink deeper into the surface beneath you. As we resume our study, there is no need to carry the tension of the day with you. Imagine that with every breath you exhale, you are releasing a little more weight, a little more worry, clearing the space in your mind for quiet observation. In our last session, we stood back and admired the skeletal system as a whole. We spoke of it as a fortress, a storehouse, and a factory. We looked at the grand architecture of the body. But tonight, we are going to change our perspective. We are going to move closer, much closer. I want you to imagine that we are holding a powerful magnifying glass, or better yet, that we are shrinking down, becoming small enough to walk upon the landscape of the bone itself. We are entering the world of histology. Histology is the study of tissues, the microscopic fabric of the body. It is the study of what things are actually made of. When you look at a bone with the naked eye, it appears smooth, solid, and perhaps a bit lifeless, like a piece of carved ivory. But as we zoom in, we discover that this is an illusion. Bone is a bustling metropolis of activity. It is a composite material of extraordinary engineering, far more sophisticated than any concrete or steel we have ever invented. Tonight, we will explore the tunnels, the caverns, and the tiny living residents that make your bones strong. Let us step into this microscopic world together. To understand bone tissue, we must first understand the recipe. If you were a master builder trying to create the perfect material to support a human body, you would face a difficult paradox. You need something hard enough to resist gravity and carry heavy loads, but if you make it too hard, it becomes brittle, like glass or chalk. If you drop a piece of chalk, it shatters. You cannot have a skeleton that shatters every time you jump or bump into a table. So, you also need flexibility. Nature solves this problem by creating a composite. Bone is made of two distinct components that work in perfect harmony. The first component is organic. It is a protein called collagen. You may have heard of collagen in skincare, but in the bone, it acts like steel cables. It provides tensile strength. It allows the bone to bend slightly, to twist and absorb shock without snapping. The second component is inorganic. These are mineral salts, primarily calcium phosphate, which crystallize into a substance we call hydroxyapatite. These tiny crystals pack tightly around the collagen fibers. They provide the hardness. They are the reason bone can endure compression. Think of it like reinforced concrete. The collagen is the steel rebar that provides flexibility, and the mineral crystals are the concrete that provides the rock-solid structure. If you were to remove the minerals, the bone would be so flexible you could tie it in a knot. If you were to remove the collagen, the bone would be so brittle it would crumble to dust in your fingers. Together, they create a material that is stronger than steel, pound for pound. Now that we understand the material, let us meet the workers. Bone is not dead. It is maintained by 4 specific types of cells. I want you to picture them as characters in a story, each with a specific job. First, we have the osteogenic cells. These are the apprentices. They are stem cells found in the membranes covering the bones. They are the only bone cells that divide. When the call to action comes, they differentiate and transform into the next type of cell. That next type is the osteoblast. Think of the B in osteoblast for builder. These are the active construction workers. They synthesize and secrete the collagen matrix and calcium salts. They are responsible for laying down new bone. As they work, they surround themselves with the very material they are building, like a bricklayer walling himself into a room. Once an osteoblast has completely surrounded itself in the hard bone matrix, it retires. It becomes an osteocyte. This is the third type. Osteocytes are the mature bone cells. They are the caretakers. They sit quietly inside tiny hollow spaces within the bone, monitoring the health of the tissue. If they detect a crack or stress, they send signals to call for repairs. Finally, there is a fourth character, often misunderstood but equally vital, the osteoclast. Think of the C for clashing or clearing. These are large cells derived from the same lineage as your white blood cells. Their job is to break down bone. They release acids and enzymes to dissolve the minerals. This might sound destructive, but it is essential. Without the demolition crew, we could never remodel the building. We need them to carve out marrow cavities and to release calcium into the blood when we need it. Now that we know the materials and the workers, let us look at the architecture they build. As we gaze through our imaginary microscope, we see that bone tissue comes in two very different arrangements. The first type is called compact bone. This is the hard, dense, white outer layer that you see on a skeleton. It looks solid, but under the microscope, it reveals a pattern of exquisite beauty. It is organized into repeating structural units called osteons, or Havasian systems. Picture a cross-section of a tree trunk. You see the rings of the wood circling a center point. An osteon looks exactly like that. It is a series of concentric cylinders. These rings are called lamellae. In the very center of the tree trunk, there is a hollow tube called the central canal, or Haversian canal. This is the lifeline. Running through this tunnel are small blood vessels and nerve fibers. This ensures that the deep layers of the hard bone are nourished and sensitive. Now, look closely at the rings, the lamellae. The collagen fibers in one ring run in a specific direction. The fibers in the next ring run in the opposite direction, and the next one switches back again. It is like plywood. This alternating pattern is a brilliant engineering trick to resist twisting forces. If you twist your arm, the fibers in one ring will stretch, but the fibers in the next ring will compress, preventing the bone from snapping. Between these rings, we find the residents we spoke of earlier, the osteocytes. They live in tiny, dark, cave-like spaces called lacunae. But remember, these cells are alive. They cannot survive in a sealed tomb. They need nutrients, and they need to talk to each other. If you look very closely, you will see hairline cracks radiating out from the lacunae like a spider web. These are called canaliculi. They are tiny canals. The osteocytes reach out their delicate arms through these canals to hold hands with their neighbors. This connects every cell in the osteon to the central blood supply. It is a vast, interconnected network of communication, allowing nutrients to pass from cell to cell, deep into the hardest rock of the body. The second type of bone tissue is spongy bone, also known as cancellous bone. We find this inside the ends of the long bones and in the center of flat bones. If compact bone is a dense collection of tree trunks, spongy bone looks like a coral reef or a honeycomb. It appears chaotic, a mess of spiky, open lattice work. But do not be deceived by its messy appearance. There is a precise order here. These thin spicules and plates of bone are called trabeculae. They are not placed randomly. They are meticulously aligned along the lines of stress. Imagine a suspension bridge. The cables are placed exactly where the tension is highest. Your body does the same thing. If you start lifting weights or gain weight, your spongy bone will dissolve and rebuild its trabeculae to realign with the new direction of force. It is dynamic engineering. And what fills the open spaces between this lattice? This is the home of the red bone marrow we discussed in our last lesson. The open structure protects the delicate blood-forming cells while keeping the bone lightweight. Why does this specific arrangement matter to you? Why construct the body with this mix of dense cylinders and open sponges? The answer lies in the balance between strength and weight. If your skeleton were made entirely of solid, compact bone, you would be incredibly strong. You could withstand massive impacts. However, you would also be immensely heavy. You would require massive muscles just to lift your legs to walk. You would be slow, inefficient, and cumbersome. By using a shell of compact bone for hardness and a core of spongy bone for lightness, your body achieves the perfect strength-to-weight ratio. It allows you to be agile. It allows you to run, jump, and dance without being weighed down by your own frame. This microscopic structure also helps us understand healing. Because bone is so vascular, filled with those central canals and blood vessels, it heals much faster than cartilage. If you tear the cartilage in your knee, it may never fully heal because it lacks blood supply. But if you break your leg, the blood rushes in, the osteoblasts wake up, and they knit the bone back together, often making it stronger than it was before. However, this system has a vulnerability. We mentioned the balance between the builders, osteoblasts, and the recyclers, osteoclasts. In a healthy young adult, their work is perfectly matched. But as we age, sometimes the recyclers start working faster than the builders. The osteoclasts remove calcium faster than the osteoblasts can replace it. When this happens, the bones become porous. The mass decreases. This is the condition known as osteoporosis. It usually hits the spongy bone first because it has more surface area. The neck of the femur, the hip, and the vertebrae of the spine are rich in spongy bone, which is why hip fractures and spinal compression fractures are so common in the elderly. Understanding the cellular war between the blasts and the clasts is the key to treating these conditions. We have now journeyed from the macroscopic view of the skeleton down to the microscopic tunnels of the osteon. We have met the cells, the builders, the caretakers, and the recyclers who work tirelessly in the dark to maintain your structure. We have seen the beautiful geometry of the lamellae rings and the efficient chaos of the spongy trabeculae. We understand what the bone is made of. But this raises a new and fascinating question. You did not start life with these complex, hard structures. When you were first forming in the womb, you had no bone at all. You were soft. How does the body turn soft tissue into this hard, crystallized matrix? How does a baby's rubbery skeleton transform into the rigid frame of an adult? This process is a kind of biological alchemy. It is called ossification. So, let us rest our eyes on the microscope for now. Let the image of those concentric rings and quiet cells fade gently into the background. We have laid the foundation. In our next lesson, we will watch the building rise from the ground up. We will explore the story of your own growth. For now, simply feel the weight of your own bones sinking into the mattress, heavy, solid, and secure. The builders are at work, keeping you safe. Lesson 3. Ossification and bone growth. Welcome back. Let the sound of my voice be a signal to your body. A signal that it is time to power down, to unclench the muscles of your jaw, to soften your hands, and to let your breathing find a rhythm as steady and slow as the tide. You are drifting into a state of pure reception. In our last 2 sessions, we explored the skeleton as it exists right now, a sturdy, living fortress of mineral and protein. We looked at the grand design, and we peered through the microscope at the intricate rings of the osteon. We saw the finished product. But tonight, I want to take you back in time. I want you to drift back to the very beginning of your own story. Imagine yourself before you were born. In the earliest weeks of your development within the womb, you had no bone. Not a single splinter of the hard, calcium-rich material you rely on today existed. Instead, your form was sketched out in softer materials. You were a blueprint made of fibrous membranes and flexible cartilage. You were resilient, but you were soft. Tonight, we are going to tell the story of ossification. This is the biological miracle of turning that soft tissue into hard bone. It is the story of how you became solid. It is a process of construction that begins in the embryo, accelerates in childhood, surges in adolescence, and only quiets down when you reach adulthood. So, let us travel back to that microscopic construction site and watch the foundations of your body being poured. The human body is a creature of immense complexity, so it is no surprise that it has developed 2 entirely different methods for building bone. It does not use a one-size-fits-all approach. Depending on the type of bone being built, nature selects the most efficient path. The first method is the simpler of the 2. It is called intramembranous ossification. The name sounds intimidating, but let us break it down gently. Intra means within, and membranous refers to a membrane. This is bone forming directly inside a sheet of soft tissue. I want you to picture the flat bones of your skull, the curved plates that protect your brain. In the very early embryo, these bones began as thin sheets of connective tissue, rich with blood vessels and primitive stem cells called mesenchymal cells. Think of a winter lake. At first, the water is fluid. Then, as the temperature drops, tiny crystals of ice begin to form on the surface. These crystals grow, spread, and eventually merge until the entire surface is a solid sheet of ice. Intramembranous ossification is remarkably similar. In the center of that soft membrane, a signal is given. The mesenchymal cells cluster together and transform into our old friends, the osteoblasts, the builders. They begin to secrete the bone matrix. This creates an ossification center. It is like that first crystal of ice. The builders deposit calcium salts, and the soft membrane hardens into bone. This bone spreads outward from the center, expanding like a ripple in a pond. As it grows, it traps blood vessels inside, creating the spongy texture we discussed in the last lesson. Finally, the builders smooth over the top and bottom surfaces to create a sandwich of hard, compact bone. This is how your skull was formed. It is also how your clavicles, or collarbones, were made. It is a direct transition from soft sheet to hard plate. But for the rest of your body, for the long, elegant bones of your arms and legs, for the vertebrae of your spine, and for the ribs, the body uses a much more complex method. This is the second method, called endochondral ossification. Endo means within, and chondral refers to cartilage. This is bone developing inside cartilage. Here, the analogy changes. We are not freezing a lake. Instead, imagine a sculptor who wants to make a statue out of gold, but first, they carve a perfect model out of wax. The wax is not the final product. It is a placeholder. It serves as a template. In the womb, your long bones, your femur, your humerus start as miniature models made of hyaline cartilage. This cartilage is smooth, blue-white, and flexible. It looks like the bone. It is shaped like the bone, but it is not bone. The process of turning this cartilage model into a skeleton is a slow act of replacement. The cartilage does not turn into bone. That is a critical distinction. The cartilage is destroyed and replaced by bone. It begins in the very center of the shaft, which we call the diaphysis. A bone collar forms around the outside of the cartilage shaft, like a ring. This cuts off the nutrient supply to the cartilage cells inside. Starved of nutrients, the cartilage cells die and the matrix begins to deteriorate, opening up cavities inside the model. Then, the periosteal bud, a collection of arteries, veins, nerves, and bone-forming cells, invades these cavities. The osteoblasts rush in like a specialized construction crew entering an abandoned building. They clear out the dead cartilage and start laying down spongy bone in its place. This is the primary ossification center. Shortly before or after birth, this same process repeats at the ends of the bone, the epiphyses. Secondary ossification centers appear, and bone begins to replace cartilage there as well. By the time you're a child, the cartilage model has been almost entirely replaced by bone. But nature leaves two critical areas of cartilage remaining. One is on the very surface of the joints, to keep them smooth. The other is a thin band of cartilage trapped between the shaft and the ends. This band is the secret to your height. It is the epiphyseal plate, or the growth plate. Let us linger on this epiphyseal plate. This tiny disc of cartilage is the engine of human growth. It is the reason you grew from a baby into the height you are today. I want you to visualize this plate as a busy factory floor, organized into distinct zones. It is a one-way street of production, pushing the ends of the bone away from the middle, lengthening the shaft. Let's walk through these zones. moving from the side of the plate nearest the joint down toward the center of the bone. First, we find the resting zone. Here, the cartilage cells are relatively inactive. They are resting, anchoring the plate to the end of the bone. Next, we enter the proliferation zone. This is where the action happens. The cartilage cells here are dividing rapidly, stacking up like coins in a roll. As they divide, they push the resting zone outward, physically lengthening the bone. This is the exact moment of growth. Below that is the hypertrophic zone. Hypertrophy means to grow large. The older cartilage cells here enlarge and swell. Their lacunae, their little caves, erode and enlarge, leaving large interconnecting spaces. Finally, we reach the calcification and ossification zone. This is the graveyard of the cartilage. The matrix calcifies, the cartilage cells die, and from below, the osteoblasts and capillaries invade the space. They turn the calcified cartilage spicules into true bone tissue. So, picture the movement. On the top side of the plate, cartilage grows and pushes upward. On the bottom side, that cartilage dies and is turned into bone. It is a conveyor belt. As long as the cartilage grows as fast as the bone replaces it, you keep getting taller. But this balance does not last forever. As you reach late adolescence, the hormones of puberty, testosterone and estrogen flood the system. These hormones initially speed up the growth, giving you that teenage growth spurt. But they also instruct the bone builders to work faster than the cartilage can grow. Slowly, the bone catches up. The osteoblasts overtake the cartilage factory. The proliferation slows down, and the ossification speeds up. The band of cartilage gets thinner and thinner. Eventually, the bone completely overtakes the cartilage. The two bony centers, the shaft and the end, fuse together. The plate disappears, leaving only a faint line, a scar known as the epiphyseal line. At that moment, usually between the ages of 18 and 21, your longitudinal growth stops. You have reached your final height. The windows of opportunity have closed, and the blueprint is fully realized. Why does this story matter to us? Beyond the wonder of it, understanding ossification gives us a profound appreciation for the timing of our lives. Think of the doctor who looks at an X-ray of a child's wrist. They are not just looking for breaks, they are looking at the gaps between the bones. In a child, the X-ray shows empty spaces between the ends of the bones and the shafts. We know now that those spaces aren't empty, they are filled with invisible cartilage. By looking at how wide those gaps are, or if they have started to fuse, the doctor can determine the child's bone age. They can predict how much taller the child will grow, or if there is a hormonal imbalance slowing the factory down. This process also explains a condition called achondroplasia, the most common form of dwarfism. In this condition, the conversion of cartilage to bone is flawed, particularly in the long bones of the arms and legs. The factory closes down too early or runs too slowly. The torso grows normally, but the limbs remain short. It highlights just how precise this mechanism needs to be. But there is another type of growth we must mention. Even after the growth plates close, your bones can still grow in width. This is called appositional growth. Imagine painting a wall with layer after layer of thick plaster. You are adding to the surface. In the bone, osteoblasts under the periosteum, the outer skin of the bone, add new bone tissue to the outside face. At the same time, osteoclasts on the inside face remove a little bit of bone to widen the marrow cavity. This ensures that as the bone gets thicker and stronger, it doesn't get too heavy. It keeps the walls appropriately thick without becoming a solid, unmovable rock. This type of growth continues throughout your life. It is how your body responds to the gym, to weightlifting, or to manual labor. You are constantly thickening your armor in response to the world. We have watched the invisible become visible. We have seen the soft, pliable cartilage of the embryo transformed, cell by cell, into the enduring structure of the adult skeleton. We have watched the race between the cartilage that lengthens us and the bone that solidifies us. We have seen the closing of the doors that determines our stature. We now have the materials. We have the method of construction. We have the history of the building. Now, it is time to take a tour of the finished structure itself. We are going to assemble the skeleton piece by piece, starting from the very top. We will begin with the most complex and protective puzzle in the human body, the vessel that holds your mind, your personality, and your dreams. So, let your thoughts settle. Let the concept of growth rest for now. You are complete as you are. In our next session, we will gently trace the contours of the axial skeleton, beginning with the skull. For now, drift into the quiet. The work of your cells continues in the silence, maintaining the masterpiece that is you. Lesson 4. The axial skeleton, the skull. Welcome back to our sanctuary of learning. As you settle in tonight, I want you to visualize a great tree standing alone in a quiet field. A tree has two distinct parts: the central trunk that stands firm against the wind, rising straight from the earth, and the branches that reach out to interact with the world, dancing in the breeze. Your skeleton is arranged in exactly the same way. We divide the 206 bones of your body into two great divisions. There is the appendicular skeleton, the branches which includes your arms, legs, shoulders, and hips. And then there is the axial skeleton, the trunk. Tonight, we begin our exploration of the axis. This is the central pillar of your being. It consists of the skull, the vertebral column, and the thoracic cage. It is the part of you that protects the most vital essence of who you are: your brain, your spinal cord, and the organs of your chest. We will start at the very top, at the crown. We are going to explore the skull. Now, when we hold a skull in our hands, metaphorically speaking, it feels like a single, solid object. It feels like a carved stone. But this is a deception. The skull is actually a complex puzzle of 22 distinct bones, all interlocked with incredible precision. It is a masterpiece of protective engineering. Tonight, we will take apart this puzzle. We will run our minds over the smooth curves of the cranium and the intricate architecture of the face. We will see how nature has built a helmet for your mind and a frame for your senses. So, relax your forehead. Let the tension between your eyebrows melt away. Let your jaw hang loose. You are ready to explore the anatomy of your own head. We divide the skull into two distinct sets of bones. The first set is the cranial bones, or the cranium. These are the 8 bones that enclose and protect the brain. They form the vault. The second set is the facial bones. These are the 14 bones that form the front of the skull, giving you your unique human appearance and providing anchors for the muscles of expression. Let us begin with the cranium. I want you to tour this vault geographically, starting from the front and moving back. Place your attention on your forehead. The smooth, vertical bone that forms your forehead and the upper roofs of your eye sockets is called the frontal bone. It is the shield that protects the frontal lobes of your brain, the seat of your personality and foresight. It curves gently upward to the top of your head. As we move backward over the crown of the head, we meet the 2 parietal bones. Imagine 2 curved plates, one on the left and one on the right, meeting perfectly in the middle. They form the superior and lateral walls of the cranium. They are the roof of the house. Now, let your mind slide down the sides of your head to the area around your ears. Here we find the temporal bones. The word temporal comes from the Latin word for time, largely because this is the area where the hair first turns grey, marking the passage of time. These bones are complex. They protect the delicate machinery of your inner ear. the organs of hearing and balance. If you touch the hard, bony bump just behind your earlobe, you are touching the mastoid process of the temporal bone, a heavy anchor for the muscles of your neck. Finally, we travel to the very back of the head, the base of the skull. Here lies the occipital bone. It curves under to form the floor of the cranium. It cradles the visual processing centers of your brain. It is the cup that holds the back of your mind. But there are two more cranial bones, hidden deep inside, that act as the internal bracing. First is the sphenoid bone. This is often called the keystone bone because it articulates with all the other cranial bones. If you were to see it in isolation, it looks remarkably like a butterfly or a bat with its wings spread. It spans the width of the skull floor, hiding behind the eyes. Second is the ethmoid bone. This is a delicate, sponge-like bone located between the eyes. It forms the roof of the nasal cavity and part of the eye sockets. It is perforated with tiny holes to allow the olfactory nerves, the nerves of smell, to pass from your nose up to your brain. These 8 bones, frontal, 2 parietals, 2 temporals, occipital, sphenoid, and ethmoid, lock together to create a sealed, secure chamber for the brain. Now, let us turn the skull around and look at the face. The face is made of 14 bones, but we will focus on the primary architects of your appearance. The most prominent are the 2 maxillae, or maxillary bones. These form your upper jaw. They hold your upper teeth and form the structure of your upper lip and the floor of your nose. They are the keystone of the face. Almost all other facial bones connect to them. Next, we have the zygomatic bones. These are your cheekbones. They form the prominences of your cheeks and the outer walls of your eye sockets. When you smile, the muscles pull against these strong arches. Bridging the gap between the eyes are the 2 tiny nasal bones. These form the hard bridge of your nose, the part where a pair of glasses would rest. The lower part of your nose, of course, is cartilage, which is why it is flexible. And finally, we have the mandible. This is the lower jaw. It is unique. Of all the 22 bones in the skull, the mandible is the only one that can move freely. It is the largest and strongest bone of the face. It holds the lower teeth and hinges against the temporal bone, allowing us to chew, to speak, and to yawn. Now that we have placed the stones, let us look at the mortar. How are these bones held together? Except for the jaw, the bones of the skull are joined by interlocking, immovable joints called sutures. I want you to imagine the seam of a zipper, or the way tectonic plates on a map fit together with jagged, zigzagging edges. This saw-toothed appearance is vital. If the bones met in a straight line, they could easily slide past each other or shear apart. But by interlocking the edges like the teeth of a saw, the bond becomes incredibly strong. The most famous of these is the sagittal suture, which runs straight down the middle of the top of your head, joining the 2 parietal bones. It looks like an arrow, or sagitta in Latin, dividing left from right. Then there is the coronal suture, which joins the frontal bone to the parietal bones. It sits like a tiara or a crown, hence corona atop the head. These sutures tell a story of your history. Remember our last lesson on growth? When you were born, these bones were not fused. They were separated by wide gaps of fibrous membrane called fontanelles, the soft spots on a baby's head. Nature designed these gaps for 2 reasons. First, they allowed the bony plates to overlap and slide over each other slightly during birth, making it possible for the infant's head to pass through the birth canal. Second, they allowed the brain to grow at a rapid pace in the first year of life. As the brain expanded, the skull expanded with it. Over time, the membranes ossified, the bones met, and the sutures locked into place. Your skull is a testament to that journey from flexibility to stability. Now, let us look underneath. If we were to tilt the skull back and look at the occipital bone at the base, we would see a large, ominous opening. This is the foramen magnum. In Latin, this simply means great hole, but its function is profound. This is the gateway. This is the portal where the brainstem descends and becomes the spinal cord. It is the physical connection point between the command center and the body. Flanking this great hole are two smooth, rounded rockers called occipital condyles. These rockers rest upon the first vertebra of your neck. They allow you to nod your head, yes. There is one more hidden feature we must explore to fully understand the skull: the paranasal sinuses. The skull is not a solid block of bone. If it were, it would be incredibly heavy. Your neck muscles would constantly strain to hold your head upright. Instead, nature has hollowed out several of the bones, the frontal, sphenoid, ethmoid, and maxillary bones, to create air-filled chambers lined with mucous membranes. These are the sinuses. They serve two beautiful functions. First, they lighten the load. They reduce the weight of the skull significantly. Second, they act as resonance chambers for your voice. Just as the body of a guitar amplifies the sound of the strings, your sinuses amplify the sound of your vocal cords. They give your voice its unique timbre and richness. When you have a cold and your sinuses are filled with fluid, the air cannot vibrate, and your voice sounds flat or nasal. Let us pause and reflect on the elegance of this design. Consider the orbit, the eye socket. It is not just a hole. It is a cone-shaped cave formed by 7 different bones coming together. It is deep enough to bury the eye safely inside, yet open enough to allow for a wide field of vision. It is padded with fat to cushion the eye, and it has tiny holes at the back for the optic nerve to carry images to the brain. Consider the zygomatic arch, that bridge of bone on the side of your cheek. You can feel it with your fingers. This arch creates a tunnel for the massive temporalis muscle to pass through and attach to your jaw. Without this architectural feature, you would not have the biting strength to chew an apple or a steak. Every bump, every hole, every ridge on the skull has a purpose. The holes, called foramina, are tunnels for specific nerves and blood vessels. The bumps, called processes, are anchor points for specific muscles. The skull is also a roadmap of human diversity. The shape of the nasal aperture, the prominence of the cheekbones, the slope of the forehead. These features vary subtly between populations and individuals, giving us the infinite variety of human faces we see every day. Yet, underneath, the blueprint remains the same. And let us not forget the hyoid bone. Although not technically part of the skull, it is closely related. It sits in your neck, just above your voice box. It is the only bone in the body that does not articulate directly with another bone. It floats, anchored only by ligaments and muscles. It serves as a movable base for the tongue. Without this lonely, floating bone, human speech, as we know it, would be impossible. It is the anchor of language. We have now mapped the capital city of the body. We have explored the vault of the cranium and the architecture of the face. We have seen how the plates lock together, and how the great hole opens the way for the nervous system to descend. But a head cannot float in mid-air. It requires a pillar. It requires a structure that is both strong enough to hold the weight of the skull and flexible enough to allow you to look over your shoulder. From the occipital condyles at the base of the skull, we must now travel downward. We are moving to the structural core of the torso. In our next lesson, we will explore the vertebral column. We will count the vertebrae, stack them one by one, and discover the elegant S curve that acts as the spring in your step. So, let your head rest heavy on the pillow. Feel the weight of your own occipital bones sinking into the softness. Your skull is safe. Your mind is safe. Let us prepare to descend the spine. Lesson 5. the axial skeleton, the vertebral column. Welcome back to the quiet study. In our last session, we held the skull in our mind's eye, that complex, protective vault that houses your consciousness. But a vault cannot simply float in space. It requires a pillar. It requires a foundation that is both strong enough to bear the weight of the head and flexible enough to allow you to turn and see the world around you. Tonight, we descend. We travel from the base of the skull down the midline of your back. We are exploring the vertebral column, commonly known as the spine. This is the central mast of the human ship. It is an engineering marvel that solves a nearly impossible problem: how to build a rod that is as rigid as a steel beam for support, yet as flexible as a willow branch for movement. As you lie there, I want you to become aware of your own back against the mattress. Feel the line of your spine. Feel how it supports you, even now, in rest. It is the axis of your physical existence. It protects the spinal cord, the superhighway of nerves that connects your brain to the rest of your body, while simultaneously holding you upright against the pull of gravity. Let us visualize this column not as a single solid bone, but as a stack of ancient coins or a string of pearls, perfectly balanced one atop the other. We will count them, name them, and understand the beautiful logic of their arrangement. The vertebral column is formed by 26 irregular bones connected and reinforced by ligaments. We call these bones vertebrae. Before we walk down the staircase of the spine, let us pause to examine one single, typical vertebra. If you were to hold one in your hand, you would see that it consists of three main parts. First, there is the body. This is the rounded, drum-like section that faces the front of your body. It is solid and thick because it is the weight-bearing portion. When you stand, the weight of your upper body passes down through these drum-like bodies, stacked like blocks. Second, behind the body, there is an arch, the vertebral arch. This arch creates an enclosed hole called the vertebral foramen. When you stack all the vertebrae together, these holes line up perfectly to form a long, continuous canal. This is the sanctuary of the spinal cord. Safely encased in bone, your nervous system runs through this tunnel like a protected river. Third, sprouting from the arch are several projections called processes. Sticking straight out the back is the spinous process. This is the bump you can feel if you run your fingers down the center of your back. It acts as a lever for muscles to pull on. Sticking out the sides are the transverse processes. These act as anchor points for ligaments and ribs. And finally, there are articular processes, smooth surfaces where one vertebra touches the next, forming the joints that allow you to bend. Now that we know the anatomy of the block, let us look at the stack. The spine is divided into 5 distinct regions. We will journey through them from top to bottom. The first region is the cervical spine. This is your neck. It consists of 7 vertebrae, labeled C1 through C7. These are the smallest and lightest of the vertebrae. They have the most delicate job, holding up the head while allowing a massive range of motion. Below the neck, we enter the thoracic spine. This is the upper and middle back. It consists of 12 vertebrae, labeled T1 through T12. These are larger than the cervical bones. Their defining feature is that each one of them articulates with a pair of ribs. They form the sturdy back wall of the rib cage. Because they are anchored to the ribs, this section of the spine is relatively rigid and stable, designed to protect the heart and lungs. Moving down, we reach the lumbar spine. This is the lower back. It consists of 5 massive vertebrae, labeled L1 through L5. These are the workhorses. They have thick, kidney-shaped bodies because they must bear the weight of the entire torso, head, and arms. When you lift a heavy box, It is these 5 bones that take the brunt of the force. They are built for strength, not for rotation. At the base of the spine, we find the sacrum. In a child, this starts as 5 separate vertebrae, but by adulthood, they fuse together into one large, triangular shield. The sacrum wedges between the hip bones, forming the strong back wall of the pelvis. It connects the spine to the lower limbs, transferring weight from your back to your legs. Finally, at the very tip, is the coccyx, or tailbone. These are 4 tiny, fused vertebrae. They are the vestigial remnant of a tail we no longer possess, now serving only as an anchor for a few pelvic muscles. Let us return to the top of the stack, to the neck, because there is a relationship there that is truly special. The first 2 cervical vertebrae are so unique they have their own names, the atlas and the axis. The first vertebra, C1, is called the atlas. It is named after the Titan from Greek mythology who was condemned to hold the heavens on his shoulders. In your body, the heavens is your skull. The atlas has no body and no spinous process. It is essentially a ring of bone with 2 large, concave dishes on top. The occipital condyles of your skull sit in these dishes. This joint allows you to rock your head forward and backward, the motion for nodding yes. Directly beneath it is C2, the axis. This vertebra has a strange, tooth-like projection sticking straight up, called the dens, or odontoid process. This tooth acts as a pivot point. The ring of the atlas sits on top of the axis and rotates around this pivot. This mechanism allows you to turn your head from side to side, the motion for shaking your head, no. So, every time you nod or shake your head, you are utilizing this precise mechanical linkage between the titan and the pivot. But bone rubbing on bone would be disastrous. We need a cushion. This brings us to the intervertebral discs. Between each vertebra, starting from C2, lies a pad of cartilage. I want you to visualize these discs as jelly donuts. They have a tough outer ring made of fibrocartilage, called the annulus fibrosus. This is the dough of the donut, strong and containing. Inside, there is a soft, gel-like center called the nucleus pulposus. This is the jelly, elastic and compressible. These discs act as shock absorbers. Every time you take a step, the impact travels up your legs and into your spine. The discs compress, squishing slightly to absorb the energy, protecting the brain from jarring. They also allow the spine to bend. Without them, you would be as stiff as a rod. Over the course of a day, gravity squeezes some of the fluid out of these discs, which is why you are actually slightly shorter when you go to bed at night than when you woke up in the morning. While you sleep, the discs rehydrate and expand, resetting for the next day. Now, visualize the spine from the side. You will notice it is not a straight vertical line. It has 4 distinct curves. The cervical and lumbar regions curve inward, towards the front of the body, concave. The thoracic and sacral regions curve outward, towards the back, convex. Together, they form a gentle, double S shape. This is not an accident, this is physics. If the spine were a straight, rigid pole, it would be very brittle. The curves act like a spring. They increase the strength and resilience of the spine, allowing it to flex and bounce under load. Interestingly, you were not born with all these curves. When a baby is born, their spine is shaped like a single C, curled forward in the fetal position. This is called the primary curvature. The secondary curvatures develop as the baby engages with the world. When a baby begins to lift its head to look around, the muscles pull on the neck, creating the cervical curve. When the baby begins to stand and walk, the effort of balancing the trunk creates the lumbar curve. The shape of your spine is a record of your development from a curled infant to an upright walker. This structure also helps us understand back pain, Because the lumbar spine carries the most weight and is the most mobile part of the lower back, it is the most vulnerable. If we lift with our back curved instead of our legs, we put immense pressure on the front of the discs. The jelly center can be squeezed backward, pushing through the tough outer ring. This is a herniated disc. If that bulge touches the spinal cord or a nerve root, it causes pain. It is a reminder that while our design is brilliant, it still respects the laws of physics. We have traced the path from the atlas holding the world, down through the rib-bearing thoracic vertebrae, through the sturdy lumbar blocks, all the way to the fused sacrum. We have seen the discs that cushion us and the curves that spring-load us against gravity. We have built the central pillar, but a pillar standing alone is vulnerable. It needs protection, especially for the vital organs that sit just in front of it, the heart and the lungs. So, for our next step, we must build the walls. We need to explore the bones that arch out from the thoracic vertebrae to circle the chest. We are going to construct the thoracic cage. Let your mind rest on the image of your spine, a strong, flexible serpent of bone, glowing with health, holding you together. You are centered, you are aligned. When we return, we will take a deep breath and explore the ribs. Lesson 6. The axial skeleton, the thoracic cage. Welcome back. Before we begin our exploration tonight, I want you to do something very simple for me. I want you to take a slow, deep breath in, hold it for a heartbeat, and then let it out in a long, gentle sigh. Feel that movement. Feel how your chest rises and expands against the blanket. Feel how it falls back down as the air leaves you. That simple, rhythmic motion is the melody of your life. It happens thousands of times a day, mostly without you ever noticing. But tonight, we are going to notice. We are going to look at the machinery that makes that breath possible. In our last lesson, we built the pillar of the spine. We stacked the vertebrae to create a strong, flexible rod running down your back. But a pillar alone cannot protect the soft, rhythmic organs of the chest. The heart, which beats tirelessly, and the lungs, which inflate and deflate like delicate sails, need a sanctuary. They need a shield that is strong enough to deflect a blow, yet flexible enough to expand with every breath. Tonight, we build that sanctuary. We are exploring the thoracic cage. This is the bony enclosure formed by the ribs, the breastbone, and the thoracic vertebrae we met last time. It is the final component of the axial skeleton. So, let your breathing settle into a natural rhythm. Let your mind travel into the center of your chest. We are about to walk the perimeter of your own protective walls. The thoracic cage is shaped somewhat like a cone, narrow at the top and widening as it goes down. It is a bird cage made of bone and cartilage. To understand it, we must look at its three main components: the anchor in the back, the shield in the front, and the curved bars that connect them. We already know the anchor. That is the thoracic spine, the 12 vertebrae in your upper back. Each of these vertebrae has smooth facets on its sides, specifically designed to catch the head of a rib. Now, let us look at the shield in the front. This is the sternum, or breastbone. The sternum is a flat bone located in the exact center of your chest. It serves as the keystone for the front of the cage. If you were to touch the center of your chest right now, that hard plate you feel is the sternum. It protects the heart, which lies just beneath and slightly to the left of it. Finally, we have the ribs. There are 12 pairs of ribs, 24 in total, forming the curved walls of the cage. Every single rib attaches to the spine in the back. They sweep around the sides of your body, curving gently downward and forward toward the sternum. But, and this is the critical detail, not all ribs reach the destination in the same way. We classify the ribs into 3 distinct groups based on how they connect to the front. The first 7 pairs, ribs 1 through 7, are called the true ribs. These are the most direct. They curve around and attach directly to the sternum, but they do not touch the bone directly. Instead, they are connected by a strip of hyaline cartilage called costal cartilage. Costal is simply the Latin word for rib. So, a true rib is a continuous arch from spine to sternum. The next three pairs, ribs 8, 9, and 10, are called the false ribs. They are called false, not because they aren't real bone, but because they do not attach directly to the sternum. Instead, their cartilage sweeps upward and attaches to the cartilage of the rib above them. Rib 10 attaches to rib 9, rib 9 attaches to rib 8, and rib 8 attaches to rib 7. It creates a beautiful, merging margin of cartilage along the bottom edge of your rib cage. Finally, the last two pairs, ribs 11 and 12, are a special type of false rib called floating ribs. These are the rebels. They attach to the spine in the back, but they are short. They do not sweep all the way around to the front. They have no cartilage attachment at all. Their tips are embedded in the muscles of the body wall. They float freely. Because they are not anchored in the front, they are the most mobile, but also the most vulnerable to breaking. Let us return to the sternum for a moment, for it has a story of its own. It is not just a flat rectangle. It is actually a fusion of three bones, and its shape has historically been compared to a Roman short sword, or gladius. The top part, the handle of the sword, is called the manubrium. It looks like a knot in a tie. If you touch the hollow at the base of your throat, the jugular notch, you are touching the top of the manubrium. This is where your collarbones, the clavicles, attach. The middle and largest part is the blade of the sword. We simply call this the body. It is long and flat. This is where ribs 2 through 7 attach. The very bottom tip of the sternum is a tiny, pointed piece of bone called the xiphoid process. The word xiphoid comes from the Greek word for sword. In a child, this tip is soft cartilage, but as we age, it ossifies into hard bone. It is small, but it serves as an important attachment point for the diaphragm and the abdominal muscles. Now, I want you to visualize the materials again. Why did nature use cartilage to connect the ribs to the sternum? Why not just have bone meet bone? The answer lies in the breath. Bone is rigid. If your rib cage were made entirely of bone, it would be a solid, immovable box. You would not be able to inhale deep breaths. The costal cartilage provides the necessary flexibility. Think of the handle on a bucket. When the handle is down, it rests against the side of the bucket. When you lift the handle, it swings outward and upward, creating more space. Your ribs move in exactly the same way. This is often called the bucket handle movement. When you inhale, the muscles between your ribs, the intercostal muscles, contract and pull the ribs upward. Because of the flexible cartilage in the front, the entire cage swings up and out. This increases the volume of the chest cavity. The pressure drops, and air rushes into your lungs to fill the space. When you exhale, the ribs swing back down, the cage gets smaller, and the air is pushed out. So, the thoracic cage is not a static prison. It is a rhythmic, expanding bellows. It is a machine designed for airflow. Let us also consider the spaces between the ribs. These are called intercostal spaces. They are not empty gaps. They are filled with layers of muscle, crisscrossing each other to seal the chest wall. Running just underneath the ridge of each rib, hidden in a little groove, is a trio of vital structures, an artery, a vein, and a nerve. They tuck themselves under the shelter of the rib bone above them for protection. It is another example of the body's obsession with protecting its supply lines. How does this anatomy connect to our daily lives and our safety? Consider the floating ribs, 11 and 12, in the back. Why have ribs that don't connect? While the upper ribs protect the heart and lungs, these lower ribs protect the kidneys, which sit high up in your lower back. Because they are not anchored in the front, they can move slightly when you bend deeply at the waist. If they were attached rigidly to the sternum, you would find it very difficult to touch your toes or twist your torso. They offer protection without sacrificing mobility. We must also respect the xiphoid process, that tiny sword tip at the bottom of the sternum. It is a landmark of great importance in emergency medicine. When someone performs CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, they must place their hands on the body of the sternum, not the xiphoid process. If you press hard on the xiphoid, it can snap off and become a jagged arrow, potentially driving inward into the liver. It is a reminder that even our armor has weak points that must be understood to be navigated safely. And think about the flexibility of the cage in youth. A child's chest is largely cartilage and very flexible bone. This is why children can take many tumbles and falls without breaking ribs. Their cage bounces. As we age, the cartilage calcifies and becomes harder. The cage becomes more rigid. This is why breathing often becomes shallower in old age. The bucket handle doesn't swing as easily as it once did. It teaches us the value of keeping our spines and rib cages mobile through gentle stretching and deep breathing throughout our lives. We have now completed the entire central axis of the body. We have built the skull to hold the mind. We have stacked the vertebral column to hold the body. We have woven the thoracic cage to hold the breath. The trunk of the tree is finished. It is solid. It is protective. It is life-sustaining. But a tree without branches cannot touch the sky. A torso without limbs cannot embrace, cannot build, cannot walk, and cannot explore. We are missing the instruments of interaction. So, in our next lesson, we will begin to attach the limbs. We call this the appendicular skeleton. We will start at the top with the pectoral girdle, the shoulder, and the arm. We will look at how the body sacrifices the stability of the central axis for the incredible freedom of the reach. For now, focus on the gentle rise and fall of your own thoracic cage. Feel the true ribs lifting. Feel the floating ribs guarding your back. You are safe within your own walls. Rest in that safety. Lesson 7. The appendicular skeleton, the pectoral girdle, and upper limb. Welcome back. Let your shoulders drop. It is a simple instruction, but take a moment to notice how often we hold tension there. We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, tight and raised against our ears. Let them fall. Let the distance between your earlobes and your collarbones lengthen. Feel the weight of your arms sinking heavily into the bed, fingers curling naturally in their rest. Tonight, we leave the central axis of the body. We have spent the last few sessions building the trunk, the skull, the spine, and the rib cage. We have built the house. Now, it is time to open the doors and windows. We are moving to the appendicular skeleton. The word appendicular comes from the same root as appendage. These are the parts of us that are attached to the center, reaching out to interact with the world. While the central axis is built for protection and stability, the appendicular skeleton is built for movement and manipulation. We begin at the top with the pectoral girdle and the upper limb. This is the machinery of interaction. This is the anatomy that allows you to embrace a loved one, to throw a ball, to write a letter, or to paint a masterpiece. It is a system designed with a very specific trade-off in mind. It sacrifices stability for an incredible, sweeping freedom of motion. So, let your attention drift to your collarbones and your shoulder blades. We are going to visualize how the arm is anchored to the body, and then we will travel down the limb, bone by bone, until we reach the tips of the fingers. The pectoral girdle, or shoulder girdle, is the foundation. It consists of only two bones on each side of the body, the clavicle and the scapula. Let's look at the clavicle first. You know this bone well. It is the collarbone. It is a slender, shaped rod that runs horizontally across the top of your chest. If you touch the base of your neck, you can feel it protruding. It acts as a strut. In engineering, a strut is a rod designed to resist compression. The clavicle pushes the shoulder joint backward and away from the chest. If we didn't have clavicles, our shoulders would collapse forward onto our chests, limiting our movement. It is the only bony attachment between the arm and the axial skeleton. That is a crucial detail. Your entire arm is held onto your body by this one slender connection to the sternum. Behind the clavicle lies the scapula, or shoulder blade. This is a triangular, flat bone that sits on the back of your rib cage, floating between ribs 2 and 7. I say floating because the scapula does not connect directly to the spine or the ribs with bone. It is held in place entirely by muscles. It glides over your back like a puck on an air hockey table. This allows your shoulder to shrug, to pull back, and to rotate. On the lateral edge of the scapula, the corner nearest your armpit, there is a shallow, cup-like depression called the glenoid cavity. This is the socket for the arm. Now, let us attach the upper limb. It is divided into 3 sections: the arm, the forearm, and the hand. The arm, technically called the brachium, contains a single bone, the humerus. The humerus is a typical long bone. At the top, it has a smooth, hemispherical head that fits into the glenoid cavity of the scapula. At the bottom, it widens to form the complex hinge of the elbow. Below the elbow is the forearm, or antebrachium. Here, we find 2 parallel bones, the ulna and the radius. To tell them apart, remember this. The ulna is on the pinky side. It is the stabilizer. It has a hook at the top that grips the humerus. The radius is on the thumb side. It is the mover. It is slightly shorter and thicker at the wrist. Finally, we reach the jewel of human anatomy, the hand. The wrist is made of 8 marble-sized bones called carpals. They are arranged in 2 rows of 4, gliding over each other to allow the wrist to bend and circle. The palm of your hand is supported by 5 long bones called metacarpals. You can feel them running through the back of your hand. And the fingers are made of 14 small bones called phalanges. Each finger has 3, a proximal, a middle, and a distal phalanx. The thumb, however, is unique. It has only 2. Let us go back and look closer at the shoulder joint, technically known as the glenohumeral joint. I want you to contrast this in your mind with the hip joint. The hip is deep and secure. The bone fits inside a deep cup. The shoulder is different. The socket of the scapula, the glenoid cavity, is incredibly shallow. It is often compared to a golf ball sitting on a golf tee. The head of the humerus is the ball, and the glenoid cavity is the tee. Why would nature design a joint so precariously? The answer is range of motion. Because the socket is shallow, the humerus is free to rotate in almost a complete circle. You can reach straight up, straight back, across your chest, and behind your head. No other joint in the body has this freedom. But there is a cost. The shoulder is the most easily dislocated joint in the body. Since the bones don't lock together tightly, the joint relies heavily on soft tissue for stability. It is held together by a group of muscles and tendons known as the rotator cuff. These muscles wrap around the head of the humerus, pulling it tightly against the scapula. They are the dynamic ligaments that keep the golf ball on the tee. Now, let's travel down to the forearm and witness a mechanical miracle. Hold your arm out in your mind, palm facing up. In this position, the radius and ulna are parallel to each other, like 2 train tracks. Now, turn your palm down. What happened to the bones? The ulna stayed relatively still. But the radius did something extraordinary. Its head spun at the elbow, and its bottom end crossed over the ulna, forming an X shape. This motion is called pronation, palm down, and supination, palm up. This seemingly simple ability to cross the bones is what allows you to turn a doorknob, use a screwdriver, or pour water from a pitcher. If the two bones were fused, or if they couldn't cross, your hand would be stuck in one position. You would have to rotate your entire body just to look at your watch. Connecting these two bones is a sheet of fibrous tissue called the interosseous membrane. This membrane does two things. First, it holds the bones together so they don't separate. Second, and more importantly, it transfers force. When you fall on your hands, the impact hits your wrist and the radius. The force travels up the radius, crosses the membrane to the ulna, and then transfers to the humerus. This shares the load and saves the elbow from shattering. Let's reflect on the fragility of the clavicle. It is the most frequently broken bone in the human body. Why? Remember, it is a strut. When you fall, your instinct is to put your arms out to catch yourself. The force of the fall travels up the arm, into the shoulder, and slams into the clavicle. The clavicle is trapped between the force coming from the arm and the immovable mass of the rib cage. So, it snaps. But this is actually a protective mechanism. It works like a circuit breaker. It is better for the clavicle to break than for the force to travel inward and shatter the neck or damage the devastatingly important blood vessels beneath it. The clavicle sacrifices itself to protect the axis. Now, consider the elbow. Reach back in your mind to the funny bone. We have all hit it that sudden, electric shock that runs down to the pinky finger. What you are hitting is not actually a bone. You are striking the ulnar nerve. At the elbow, the humerus has a large spool-shaped surface called the trochlea and a bony bump on the inside called the medial epicondyle. The ulnar nerve runs right behind this bump, pressed against the bone with very little padding. When you hit it, you are compressing the nerve directly against the hard humerus. It is a reminder of how exposed our wiring can be. Finally, look at the thumb. The joint at the base of the thumb is a special type of joint called a saddle joint. The bones are shaped like two saddles fitting into each other, one convex, one concave. This geometry allows the thumb to move across the palm to touch the tips of the other fingers. This is opposition. This movement is the foundation of the human grip. It is what allowed our ancestors to pick up tools, to weave, to write, and to build. Without that saddle joint, our hands would be simple paws, good for pushing and scratching, but incapable of delicate craft. We have traced the anatomy of the reach. We have seen the strut of the clavicle and the floating wing of the scapula. We have appreciated the freedom of the shoulder and the clever rotation of the forearm. We have marveled at the intricacy of the wrist and the tool-making power of the thumb. The upper limb is an instrument of the mind. It is light, fast, and incredibly versatile. But lightness comes at a price. The arm cannot bear weight. You cannot walk on your hands for long. You cannot support a building with these bones. For that, we need a different kind of engineering. We need pillars. We need depth. We need stability. So, we must leave the upper body and travel south. We are going to descend to the pelvic girdle and the lower limb. There, we will find bones built not for waving, but for carrying. We will trade the shallow socket of the shoulder for the deep, secure bowl of the hip. Let your arms rest now. Let them be heavy and limp, their work done for the day. When we return, we will stand firm. Lesson 8. The appendicular skeleton, the pelvic girdle and lower limb. Welcome back. I invite you now to shift your awareness away from your head, away from your chest, and away from your hands. Let those parts of you fade into the background. Let them drift into the softness of the bed. Tonight, we are going to travel down. We are descending into the foundations of your temple. We are moving to the hips and the legs. In our last lesson, we explored the upper body. We marveled at the shoulder, that shallow, slippery joint that allows you to reach for the stars. We spoke of mobility, of lightness, of the ability to manipulate the world. The upper body is built for freedom. But freedom has a price. You cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation of clouds. You need rock. You need pillars of immense density and strength. Tonight, we explore the pelvic girdle and the lower limb. This is the anatomy of stability. These are the bones that carry you through the world. They bear the weight of your head, your trunk, and your arms, and they transfer that weight into the earth. They are thicker, heavier, and more securely locked together than any other bones in your body. As you lie here, I want you to feel the weight of your own hips sinking into the mattress. Feel the heaviness of your legs. Gravity is not an enemy here. It is a partner. These bones were born to wrestle with gravity and win. Let us explore the engineering of your stance. We begin with the anchor, the pelvic girdle. While the shoulder girdle was open and loose, remember the floating scapula. The pelvic girdle is a closed, rigid ring. It is a basin of bone. It is formed by two massive bones, one on the left and one on the right. We call them the coxal bones, or simply the hip bones. In the front, these two hip bones meet and lock together at a joint called the pubic symphysis, cushioned by a tough disc of fibrocartilage. In the back, they sandwich the sacrum, the base of your spine, between them. This creates a complete, continuous circle of bone. Hip, sacrum, hip, pubis. This ring is vital. It connects the axial skeleton, the spine, to the appendicular skeleton, the legs. It is the transfer point. When you sit, your weight travels from the spine to the pelvis. When you stand, it travels from the pelvis to the legs. Now, although the coxal bone looks like one giant piece, it is actually a fusion of three separate bones. This fusion happens during childhood. By the time you are an adult, the seams have disappeared, but we still name the regions based on these original three parts. The first part is the ilium. This is the largest, uppermost portion. It is the wide, flaring blade of bone that you can feel when you put your hands on your hips. That ridge under your fingers is called the iliac crest. It serves as a massive anchor point for the muscles of your back, flank, and hip. It protects the organs of the lower abdomen. The second part is the ischium. This is the bottom, posterior part of the hip. It is the bone you are sitting on right now, or would be, if you were seated. We often call the bottom curve the sit bone, or ischial tuberosity. It is thick and rugged because it bears all your weight when you are in a chair. The third part is the pubis. This is the anterior, or front, portion. It forms the V shape at the bottom of the pelvis. It supports the bladder and acts as a strut to keep the hips spaced apart. Where these three bones meet the ilium, ischium, and pubis, they form a deep, cup-like socket on the side of the pelvis. This socket is called the acetabulum. The word acetabulum means vinegar cup in Latin. It is deep, circular, and reinforced with a strong rim. This is the socket for the leg. Unlike the shallow golf tee of the shoulder, this is a baseball glove holding the ball tightly. It is built for security. Now, let us attach the lower limb. The bone of the thigh is the femur. The femur is the king of the skeleton. It is the longest, heaviest, and strongest bone in the human body. It takes a tremendous amount of force to break a femur. Its head is a perfect sphere that fits snugly into the acetabulum. Below the thigh, we have the leg proper. Just like the forearm, there are two bones here. The massive, thick bone on the inside, the big toe side, is the tibia, or shin bone. This is the weight bearer. It receives the weight from the femur and passes it to the foot. The slender, stick-like bone on the outside is the fibula. It does not bear weight. You could actually walk without it, though you would be very unstable. Its job is to act as a splint for the ankle and an anchor for muscles. Finally, we reach the foot. The ankle consists of 7 tarsal bones. These are much larger and heavier than the wrist bones. The foot has 5 metatarsals, and the toes, like the fingers, have phalanges. Let us linger on the architecture of the femur. If you look at this bone, you will notice something peculiar. The shaft of the femur does not go straight down from the hip. It angles inward. The head of the femur sits in the hip socket, which is wide on the side of the pelvis. But the bottom of the femur, the knee, sits directly under your body's center of gravity. This diagonal angle is crucial. It brings your knees in line with your center. Imagine if your femurs went straight down like table legs. You would be wide-based and clumsy. You would have to waddle from side to side like a penguin to keep your balance. This inward angle allows for the smooth, efficient, linear stride of human walking. This angle is generally sharper in women than in men, simply because the female pelvis is wider. And speaking of the female pelvis, this is one of the clearest examples of form following function. The female pelvis is modified for childbearing. Compared to the male pelvis, it is shallower, lighter, and rounder. The angle of the pubic arch is wider. The opening in the center, the pelvic inlet, is larger and more circular. The male pelvis, by contrast, is taller, narrower, and heavier. It is built purely for physical strength and speed, whereas the female pelvis is a compromise between efficient locomotion and the miracle of birth. Now, let us look at the knee. Floating in front of the knee joint is a bone we haven't mentioned yet, the patella, or kneecap. The patella is a very special type of bone called a sesamoid bone. This means it is a bone that forms inside a tendon. It is embedded within the tendon of the massive quadriceps muscle of your thigh. Why is it there? It acts as a pulley. Imagine trying to lift a heavy bucket with a rope over a sharp ledge. The rope would fray, and it would be hard to pull. Now imagine putting a smooth wheel on the edge. The rope glides, and you have better leverage. The patella pushes the tendon away from the knee joint, increasing the angle of pull. It gives your thigh muscles about 30% more leverage. Without a kneecap, you would struggle to stand up from a squatting position. It is a tiny bone that grants you immense power. Let us travel all the way down to the foot. The foot is a masterpiece of engineering. It has to endure the impact of your body weight hitting the ground thousands of times a day. If the foot were a flat, solid slab, every step would send a jarring shockwave up through your legs to your spine and skull. Instead, the foot is constructed of arches. There are 3 arches, 2 running lengthwise, longitudinal, and 1 running across the foot, transverse. The bones are arranged like the stones of a bridge, held in place by strong ligaments and tendons. When you step, these arches flatten slightly. They spread out under the load, absorbing the energy of the impact. Then, as you lift your foot, the elastic tissues snap the arches back into shape, returning that energy to help push you forward into your next step. You essentially have springs in your shoes. This is why flat feet or fallen arches can be so painful. Without that spring mechanism, the shock is transferred directly to the knees and hips, causing wear and tear over time. We should also correct a common misunderstanding about the broken hip. We often hear of elderly people falling and breaking their hip. Usually, they have not broken the hip bone, the pelvis itself. They have broken the neck of the femur. The neck is the narrow strut of bone that connects the round head of the femur to the long shaft. It is the weakest point. In osteoporosis, this neck becomes brittle and porous. Sometimes, the bone is so weak that it snaps first under the weight of the body, causing the person to fall. The fall didn't cause the break caused the fall. It is a sobering reminder of the importance of maintaining bone density through diet and load-bearing exercise. Let us also appreciate the fibula, that thin, outer leg bone. While it doesn't carry weight, it forms the outer bump of your ankle. This bump is called the lateral malleolus. It acts like a bracket, hugging the talus bone of your foot so your ankle doesn't slide sideways. If you sprain your ankle, you have likely overstretched the ligaments attached to this stabilizer. It is the guardian of your balance. We have now constructed the entire skeleton. We built the axis, the skull, spine, and ribs. We attached the upper limbs for reaching and holding, and tonight we attach the lower limbs for standing and walking. You are now a complete assembly of 206 bones. You have the frame, you have the armor, you have the levers, but if we left it here, you would be nothing more than a pile of bones on the floor. Bones are rigid, they are hard. If you put two hard stones together and tried to move them, they would grind, crack, and crumble. To turn this statue into a machine, we need connections. We need spaces between the bones that allow for movement without destruction. We need lubrication. We need hinges, pivots, and gliders. We need joints. In our next lesson, we will explore the articulations. We will look at the miraculous engineering that allows hard bone to glide against hard bone as smoothly as ice on ice. We will learn how you are held together, not just by bone, but by the soft, intelligent tissues that bind them. For now, feel the solidity of your legs. Feel the strength of your femurs. You are grounded. You are supported by the strongest pillars nature has ever designed. Rest in that strength. Lesson 9. Articulations. Welcome back. I want you to imagine, for a moment, a statue carved from the finest white marble. It is beautiful. It is anatomically perfect. It has the femur, the skull, the ribs, and the delicate phalanges of the hands. It stands tall and proud. But if you were to push this statue, it would topple over stiffly. If you were to ask it to wave, or to walk, or to bow, it would remain frozen. It is rigid. It is a prisoner of its own hardness. Up until this point in our journey, we have essentially built this statue. We have constructed a frame of 206 hard, mineralized bones. We have built the armor and the levers. But a skeleton without joints is just a statue. It is a cage. Tonight, we turn the statue into a machine. We are going to explore the miracle of articulations. An articulation, or a joint, is simply the place where two bones meet. It is the junction. It is the hinge that allows the door to open, the pivot that allows the wheel to turn. It is the engineering solution to the problem of being made of stone. Tonight, we will look at how nature solves the friction problem. We will see how hard bone can glide against hard bone as smoothly as ice sliding on ice. We will explore the different ways you are held together, from the sutures that lock your skull tight to the loose, swinging freedom of your shoulder. So, relax your own joints now. Let your elbows sink. Let your knees fall open slightly. Let your fingers uncurl. You are a masterpiece of flexible engineering. Let us see how you work. We classify joints not by their size, but by their function specifically, by how much they allow us to move. We can place every joint in your body onto a spectrum, ranging from immovable to freely movable. Let us start at the quiet end of the spectrum. These are the synarthroses. The prefix syn means together. These are immovable joints. This might seem like a contradiction. Why have a joint if it doesn't move? The answer is growth and protection. Think back to the skull. The zigzag sutures between the parietal and frontal bones are joints. They are bound tightly by short fibers of connective tissue. They allow the skull to expand during childhood, but in the adult, they are essentially fused. They sacrifice movement for absolute protection. We do not want the plates of the skull sliding around while we think. Another example is the way your teeth fit into your jaw. This is a special joint called a gomphosis, which literally means bolt. The tooth is the bolt, held in the socket by a ligament. Ideally, this joint should never move. If it does, you visit a dentist. Moving along the spectrum, we find the amphiarthroses. Amphi means on both sides, or intermediate. These are slightly movable joints. They are the compromise. Think of the connection between your two hip bones, in the front, the pubic symphysis. It is a pad of fibrocartilage. It doesn't swing or hinge, but it has a little give. It can absorb shock. In women during childbirth, hormones soften this joint to allow the pelvis to widen. Another example is the joint between the vertebrae of your spine. The intervertebral disc allows a small amount of bending, just a few degrees. But when you add up that small movement across 20 vertebrae, you get the flexibility to touch your toes. Finally, we arrive at the star of the show, the diarthroses. These are the freely movable joints. They are also known as synovial joints. When you think of a joint, your knee, your elbow, your shoulder, your knuckle, you are thinking of a synovial joint. These are designed for motion. They are the bearings of the human machine. I want to take you deep inside a synovial joint. I want you to visualize it as a meticulously designed room where two bones meet. First, look at the ends of the bones. They are not bare. If bare bone rubbed against bare bone, it would be like two pieces of sandpaper grinding together. It would be painful and destructive. Instead, the ends of the bones are capped with a layer of articular cartilage. This is hyaline cartilage. It is smooth, glassy, and slick. It is the Teflon coating of the body. It is only a few millimeters thick, but it is incredibly durable. Next, notice that the two bones do not actually touch. There is a tiny space between them called the joint cavity. This space is enclosed by a watertight wrapper called the articular capsule. This capsule seals the joint off from the rest of the body. Inside this sealed capsule, there is a special lining called the synovial membrane. This membrane produces a magical substance called synovial fluid. The word synovial comes from the Latin for egg, because this fluid feels exactly like raw egg white. It is viscous, slippery, and warm. This fluid fills the tiny space between the cartilage caps. It does three vital things. First, it lubricates. It reduces friction to almost zero. A healthy human joint is 5 times more slippery than ice melting on ice. Second, it acts as a shock absorber. It distributes the force of impact evenly. Third, it nourishes the cartilage. Remember, cartilage has no blood vessels. It relies on this fluid to bring it oxygen and nutrients. There is a fascinating mechanism here called weeping lubrication. Imagine the cartilage is like a sponge. When you stand up and put weight on your knee, you squeeze the fluid out of the cartilage and into the joint space, making it slippery. When you sit down and take the weight off, the cartilage soaks the fluid back up. This is why movement is so essential. Without the pumping action of movement, the fluid creates a stagnant pool, and the cartilage starves. Motion is literally the heartbeat of the joint. To keep this slippery system stable, the capsule is reinforced by ligaments. Ligaments are dense, strong bands of tissue that connect bone to bone. They are the strapping tape. They prevent the bones from sliding too far in the wrong direction. And often, we have bursae. A bursa is a tiny, fluid-filled pillow. We find them wherever a tendon rubs against a bone. They act as ball bearings. reducing friction so your muscles can glide over your joints without fraying. Now that we understand the machinery, let us look at the mechanical linkages. The body uses simple engineering principles to create complex movement. We can categorize synovial joints by their shape. Let us start with the hinge joint. Travel to your elbow. Here, the spool-shaped end of the humerus fits into the trough of the ulna. It allows movement in only one plane: flexion, bending, and extension, straightening. Like the hinge on a door, it opens and closes. That is all it does, but it does it with great strength. The knee and the fingers are also modified hinges. Next, consider the pivot joint. We saw this in the neck, between the atlas and the axis. One bone acts as a pin, and the other is a ring that rotates around it. This allows for rotation. It is also found in the forearm, allowing the radius to spin so you can turn your palm up and down. Now, look at the ball and socket joint. We find this in the shoulder and the hip. A spherical head fits into a cup-like depression. This is the most liberated type of joint. It allows movement in all axes: up, down, forward, backward, and rotation. It is the universal joint of the body. But remember the trade-off we spoke of. The shoulder is a shallow socket, giving it great range but low stability. The hip is a deep socket, giving it great stability but less range. You can swing your arms in a circle. You cannot do the same with your legs. There are also gliding joints, or plane joints. These are found in the wrist bones, carpals, and ankle bones, tarsals. The bones have flat surfaces that simply slide past one another, like tiles shifting on a floor. They allow for subtle adjustments and flexibility. And finally, the saddle joint. We revisit the thumb. Each bone surface has both concave and convex areas, fitting together like a rider in a saddle. This allows the thumb to rock back and forth and side to side, giving us that crucial ability to grip. This anatomy helps us understand the experience of cracking a joint. When you pull on your finger to crack a knuckle, you are expanding the volume of the joint capsule. This sudden drop in pressure causes dissolved gases in the synovial fluid, like nitrogen and carbon dioxide, to form a bubble and burst. Pop. It is essentially the joint taking a deep breath. It takes about 20 minutes for the gas to dissolve back into the fluid before you can pop it again. It also helps us understand arthritis. Osteoarthritis is simply the wearing down of that glassy articular cartilage. It is the Teflon scratching off the pan. As the cartilage erodes, the rough bone underneath is exposed, friction increases. Inflammation sets in. The smooth, silent glide becomes a grinding ache. It is a mechanical failure of the surface. We have now assembled the machine. We have the rigid beams of the bones. We have the smooth bearings of the joints. We have the lubrication of the synovial fluid. We have the strapping tape of the ligaments. The skeleton is now capable of movement. It is a masterpiece of mechanical design, ready to walk, to run, to grasp, and to dance. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. We have been speaking of the skeleton as if it were a finished product, a machine built in the factory of the womb, and then simply used for a lifetime. This is not true. Your skeleton is not a dead frame. It is not a permanent stone carving. It is a living, breathing landscape that is constantly destroying and rebuilding itself. Every 10 years, you essentially have a brand new skeleton. How does this happen? Who are the architects that work while you sleep, replacing old beams with new ones? For our final lesson, we will look at the dynamic life of the bone itself. We will explore bone remodeling. We will learn how your body manages its mineral bank account and repairs the microscopic cracks of daily life. For now, feel the fluidity of your body. Gently wiggle your fingers. Feel the silence of that movement. That is the gift of the synovial joint. Rest in that smoothness. Lesson 10. Bone Remodeling and Homeostasis. Welcome, traveler. We have arrived at the final destination of our journey. Over the course of these lessons, we have mapped the geography of your body. We have explored the fortress of the skull, the pillar of the spine, the cage of the chest, and the elegant levers of the limbs. We have looked at the microscopic rings of the osteon and the slippery engineering of the synovial joints. We have built the human skeleton in our minds. But there is one final secret we must uncover. It is a secret that changes how we view ourselves. When we look at a skeleton in a museum or a diagram in a textbook, we see something static. We see a structure that looks finished, like a stone statue carved by a master and then left to stand for eternity. We tend to think of our own bones in this way, as hard, lifeless rocks that support us, unchanging until they break. This is an illusion. The reality is that your skeleton is vibrant, dynamic, and constantly changing. It is one of the most active organ systems in your body. It is in a perpetual state of renovation. The bone you have today is not the bone you had 10 years ago, and it is not the bone you will have 10 years from now. Tonight, for our final lesson, we explore bone remodeling and homeostasis. We will discover how your body tears down the old to build the new. We will learn how your skeleton balances the chemistry of your blood. We will understand that you are not a finished statue, but a living process. So, for the last time, let your body sink into the bed. Feel the heaviness of your frame. Acknowledge that even now, in the stillness of your rest, a million tiny architects are working silently within you, rebuilding your foundation. To understand this process, I want you to imagine a bustling city. In this city, there are two crews of workers who are constantly on shift, day and night. They work on the roads, the bridges, and the buildings. One crew is the demolition team. Their job is to find old, damaged, or unnecessary concrete and break it down. The other crew is the construction team. Their job is to follow behind the demolition crew and pour fresh, strong cement to fill the gaps. In the city of your skeleton, these crews have names. The demolition team is made of cells called osteoclasts. These are large, fascinating cells. They are actually cousins of the white blood cells that fight infection. They move along the surface of the bone, seeking out areas that need renewal. When they find a spot, they seal themselves tight against the mineral surface. Then, they release a potent cocktail of acids and enzymes. The acid dissolves the hard calcium crystals, the concrete, and the enzymes digest the collagen fibers, the rebar. This process is called resorption. It sounds destructive, but it is an act of cleaning. They are clearing away the microscopic cracks and fatigue damage that accumulate simply from walking and living. They are scrubbing the slate clean. Following close behind them is the construction team, the osteoblasts. We met these friends in our earlier lessons. They are the builders. They rush into the tunnels carved by the osteoclasts and begin to work. They synthesize and secrete the collagen matrix, laying down the soft framework. Then, they orchestrate the crystallization of calcium and phosphorus, turning that soft matrix into hard, durable bone. This process is called deposition. Together, this cycle of resorption and deposition is called bone remodeling. It is a delicate, unending dance. In a healthy young adult, the two teams work at exactly the same speed. The amount of bone being broken down equals the amount of bone being built. Your total bone mass remains constant, but the material itself is new. It is estimated that every week, you recycle about 5 to 7% of your bone mass. Every 3 to 4 years, your spongy bone is completely replaced. every 10 years, your compact bone is renewed. You are effectively receiving a brand new skeleton every decade of your life. You are a creature of constant renewal. But why? Why does the body spend so much energy tearing down and rebuilding a perfectly good skeleton? Nature is efficient. It does not waste effort without a reason. There are two profound reasons for this constant work. The first reason is maintenance and repair. Bone, like any material, suffers from fatigue. Every time you take a step, tiny microscopic cracks form in the matrix. If these cracks were allowed to accumulate, your bones would eventually become brittle and shatter like old china. The remodeling process is a proactive repair system. The osteoclasts are sent to the sites of these microcracks to grind them out, and the osteoblasts patch them up with fresh, strong bone. It is preventative maintenance. The second reason is calcium homeostasis. This is the chemical why. We spoke in Lesson 1 about the skeleton being a bank vault for calcium. Now we see how the transactions are made. Calcium is the currency of life. Your nerves need it to send signals. Your muscles need it to contract. Your heart needs it to beat. Your blood needs it to clot. The level of calcium in your blood must be kept within a very narrow, precise range. It is a matter of life and death. If your blood calcium drops too low, a condition called hypocalcemia, your nervous system becomes excitable, and your muscles can go into spasms. If your blood calcium gets too high, hypercalcemia, your nervous system becomes depressed, and you can go into a coma. So, the body uses the skeleton to regulate this balance. It is controlled by hormones. Imagine the blood calcium drops. The body senses the shortage. The parathyroid glands in your neck release a hormone called parathyroid hormone, PTH. This hormone is the withdrawal slip. It travels to the bones and wakes up the osteoclasts, the demolition crew. It tells them, "We need calcium in the blood. Break down some bone." The osteoclasts speed up their work. They dissolve the bone matrix and release the stored calcium into the bloodstream, restoring the balance. The bank has saved the economy. Now, imagine the reverse. You drink a large glass of milk, your blood calcium rises. The thyroid gland releases a hormone called calcitonin. This hormone is the deposit slip. It inhibits the osteoclasts and stimulates the osteoblasts, the builders. It tells them, "We have excess materials. Store it." The builders take the calcium from the blood and lock it away in the bone matrix. This constant tug of war keeps your internal environment perfectly stable, regardless of what you eat or do. Your skeleton is the silent guardian of your blood chemistry. There is a third factor that controls this remodeling, and it is perhaps the most empowering for us to understand. It is the law of mechanical stress, known as Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law states that a bone grows or remodels in response to the demands placed on it. This means that your bones are smart. They can feel how you use them. When you exercise, when you run, lift weights, or carry groceries, your muscles pull on your bones. This stress creates a tiny, harmless electrical signal within the bone tissue. This signal acts like a beacon. It tells the osteoblasts, "Build here. We are under stress. We need to be stronger." And so, the builders add more bone mass to that specific area. This is why the racket arm of a professional tennis player has bones that are significantly thicker and stronger than their non-playing arm. The skeleton has adapted to the specific labor asked of it. It is why weight-bearing exercise is the best prescription for skeletal health. You are literally telling your body to reinforce its walls. Conversely, this law works in reverse. If you do not use your bones, the signal stops. The osteoclasts, the recyclers, look around and say, "This material is not being used. It is wasteful to keep it." And they begin to break it down. This is the tragedy of the astronaut. In the zero gravity of space, there is no weight to bear. The skeleton is not stressed. The body begins to dissolve the bones at a rapid rate, leading to significant bone loss. It is also why bedridden patients lose bone density. The lesson is clear: use it or lose it. Movement is the language your skeleton understands. This dynamic nature also explains how broken bones heal. When you break a bone, you are essentially creating a massive remodeling project. First, a hematoma forms a blood clot to seal the break. Then, a fibrocartilaginous callus forms. This is a soft bridge of cartilage that connects the broken ends. Next, the osteoblasts rush in and turn that soft cartilage into a bony callus. This is hard, spongy bone. The two ends are reunited. Finally, over the next several months, the remodeling crew comes in. The osteoclasts shave down the excess bump, and the osteoblasts refine the structure until the bone looks almost exactly as it did before. In many cases, the site of the break becomes stronger than the surrounding bone. It is the ultimate testament to the body's resilience. And so, we come to the end of our curriculum. Think back to where we started. We began with a simple question: what holds us up? We journeyed through the microscopic lattice of the tissues. We watched the soft cartilage of the embryo turn into the hard bone of the adult. We traced the protective curves of the skull, the spine, and the ribs. We extended our reach through the arms and found our footing with the legs. We lubricated the joints to allow for the grace of movement. And finally, tonight, we learned that this entire structure is a living, breathing, shifting masterpiece that renews itself every day of your life. I hope you have come to see your body not just as a vessel, but as a companion. It is an ancient, intelligent system that works tirelessly for your benefit. While you sleep tonight, the osteoclasts will sweep away the old. The osteoblasts will lay down the new. The marrow will birth new blood cells. The calcium will flow like a balanced river. The fortress remains strong. You do not need to direct it. You do not need to worry about it. It knows what to do. It has known since before you were born. Your only job now is to rest. To give these silent workers the peace and the stillness they need to perform their nightly miracles. You are supported. You are protected. You are whole. Let the knowledge drift away now. Let the names of the bones fade into the velvet dark. There is only the slow rhythm of your breath and the quiet strength of your bones. Sleep well.